Welcome, everybody, to our very first podcast recording for Lessons Unplugged. As you know, Lessons Unplugged is brought to you by rotamarketing.com. I'm your host, Matthew Rota. Today we have the honor and privilege of interviewing one of the co-authors to one of our favorite books out there called The Go-Giver. Bob Burg's here with us today. And the point of our podcast is basically to ask a couple different questions to the different authors, consultants that we'll be interviewing. Kind of pick their brains for life lessons that they'd like to share with our audience, any insights, wisdoms that they have that they could, make our audience's lives better and just help them kind of get to reach their goals quicker than they might be currently. All right, so a little bit about Bob. Can a subtle shift in focus really make that big of a difference in your business and income? Our guest today says absolutely yes. Bob Burg is a sought-after speaker at corporate conventions and for entrepreneurial events. He regularly addresses audiences ranging in size from 50 up to 16,000, sharing the platform with notables including today's top thought leaders, broadcast personalities, Olympic athletes, and political leaders, including a former U.S. president. Although for years he was best known for his book Endless Referrals, over the past few years it's been his business parable, The Go-Giver, co-authored with John David Mann, that has captured the heart and imagination of his readers. It shot to number 6 on the Wall Street Journal's business bestseller list just 3 weeks after its release and reached number 9 on Business Week's list as well. It's been translated into 21 languages and is his 4th book to sell over 250,000 copies. His newest book is entitled Adversaries into Allies, Win People Over Without Manipulation or Coercion, which discusses how to master the art of ultimate influence. Bob is an advocate, supporter, and defender of the free enterprise system, believing that the amount of money one makes is directly proportional to how many people they serve. He is an unapologetic animal fanatic and serves as a member of the board of directors of Furry Friends Adoption and Clinic in Jupiter, Florida. Welcome, Bob, and thanks again for joining us today. It's obviously our sincere pleasure to be here with you and have you share some of your insights and lessons with our audience.
Oh, thank you, Matthew. It was a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Appreciate you being here. Like I did, I sent you a couple list of questions. We'll jump right into them. The first one is, tell us a little bit about yourself so our audience out there who's not as well informed of who you are and what you're up to gets a little bit of a better understanding about this.
Well, really, I am a former broadcaster. Started out in radio and then television news. I was about the worst newscaster you've ever seen, so it wasn't long before I was no longer a newscaster.
Yep.
And I graduated into sales. Knew nothing about sales or selling, so began studying it and really learning from the masters, the Tom Hopkins, the Zig Ziglars, and people. And immediately my sales began to increase, and I started to really enjoy it. And I continued to study it. I really believe that sales is simply understanding human emotions and in human nature and so forth, and it's fascinating. Worked my way up to sales manager of a company and eventually began to share with others what was working for me and for my team, and began speaking on the topic. And I've really been speaking on sales, personal development, because sales is personal development,
yep.
And doing so for about 25 years now. So it's really a lot of fun, enjoy it. I'm also, as you were kind enough to mention, an animal fanatic, so I spend a lot of my time in that regard. And also as a person who enjoys communicating and educating people about the free enterprise system.
Very cool. I'm going to throw you a little curveball here. This wasn't on the list of questions, but it's one of the questions I'm most interested in kind of learning.
Okay.
Where did the idea for the Go-Giver come from? The characters, as I mentioned to you in my communications on Twitter and stuff, the characters are like all-encompassing in a way. It kind of covers, like you mentioned, the personal development, but the sales, the business, the just the everyday life situations. How exactly did you come up with that idea, and how did it come to fruition?
Well, years ago, I had a book. It was probably my first big book, if you will, called Endless Referrals, Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was really a book on business networking, creating those know you, like you, trust you relationships with people. And that first came out in 1994. Now, throughout the years, and I'm an avid reader, I love reading, and I've always enjoyed reading parables, business fables, since since they really first came on the scene. Well, they came on the scene long ago, but they got popular really in the 80s. But books like Og Mandino's Greatest Salesman in the World, and James Classen's Richest Man in Babylon, and just wonderful books. The Wealthy Barber, and then in the early 80s, Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson with the 1 Minute series, 1 Minute Manager, 1 Minute. Great books, wonderful books. And then, people who become friends of mine, Robin Sharma, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, and Chris Widener, and just all sorts of, and every one of these business parables I learned something from. It was an enjoyable read. It was a quick read. Yep. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic foundation, if you will, the premise of endless referrals, which is, again, all things being equal or close enough to it, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. Yep. Could we take that and put that into a story? Now, the idea for that with endless referrals is that you shift your focus from yourself to other people, focusing on providing value to others. So you're a go-giver. You're looking to give value. It doesn't mean you're giving things away for free. It means you're giving value. You're focusing on creating value for others. So I got the idea and the title for the book, and I had a very sketchy outline and began to write. And you know what, Matthew? It took me about 60 seconds, maybe less, to realize there's a big difference between writing a how-to book, which really anyone can write. You put down what you know and you have a good editor clean it up. A big difference between that and a work of fiction, which is what The Go-Giver was going to be. So I knew that I didn't, it was fine that it was outside my comfort zone. I can live outside my comfort zone. But it was, as Dr. John Maxwell would say, outside my strength zone. Okay, so I knew I needed to find someone. I had only one person in mind, and that was John David Mann. He was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I used to write for. And he's such a great, and people who knew John, now everyone knows him. Back then, he was known to a more select group of people within his niche. And people who he edited for. And we all knew he was a genius, and so he's the guy I wanted to. And the running joke with us, whenever he'd edit my articles every month for the magazine, he's such a nice man, such a humble guy, and so he'd write back and say, "Oh, I corrected this, I changed this, is this okay?" Yeah, and I'd always write back and say, "John, not only is it okay, you write my stuff better than I write my stuff." And so I asked John if he would be the lead writer and storyteller for The Go-Giver. Now, when I say I asked him, I mean I pleaded with him. And fortunately, he agreed to do it, and he's the guy who really made the characters come alive and the story really sing. So it was a great collaboration between the two of us. But really, that's how it came to be. Then we found a great agent, and it was the agent who represented and still represents Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson. So we knew we wanted that firm to do it, and we were able to fortunately land them as an agent. Now, it took about 25, 26 New York publishers saying no before we were able to find the one that said yes, and it happened. We found the perfect publisher for us because Penguin Portfolio has been just great. Cool. And I've worked with many publishing houses because I've got about 10 books out, and they've all been nice people, and they've all been good publishers, but these people they're the best, and they're a delight. So everything just came together exactly like we'd love it to.
Awesome. How long of a process was that? From years? Are we talking years or a couple months or a decade, or was it a pretty...
No, it was actually from the time John came into this. It was really only about 3 or 4 months before the story was written. We were on the phone and on email, all the time, and this story got written and rewritten. We dotted every I, crossed the T, and again, he was the lead writer. The toughest part was finding the publisher. And that was a process of about a year because we went through a lot that said no. And so we redid, not so much the story, we were always tweaking the story. And we had a great team that was giving us feedback, and it was wonderful. But it was tweaking how we were going to promote it and some of the things we were going to do, the plan behind it, that was really what caught the eye of that particular publisher. And they've been, like I said, they've been so supportive that it was worth the wait.
I was going to say, the stars aligned for you at the right time. Very cool. Here's a question that obviously can go in a million different directions. Feel free to take it anywhere you want. But what are you passionate about?
Few things, I'd say. The message of both the go-giver and really the message is that if you really want to build a business that you enjoy and that is profitable and that provides value to others, you shift your focus from an I focus to an other focus, always looking for ways to provide value to them. It's, again, the go-giver. It doesn't mean you give yourself away. It doesn't mean you're taken advantage of, you're some kind of martyr. It means you understand that to the degree that you keep the customer in mind, that the degree, and even if they're not a customer, anyone with whom you're forming a relationship, to the degree that you make your win about their win, not only are you bringing wonderful value to them and creating a great relationship, but you're going to receive in abundance. And so that's a message we wanted to really share. My newest book, Adversaries and Two Allies, is sort of the culmination of my life's work, I guess, and that's because I have been blessed to have wonderful parents. I still have them, thank God, to this day. And my dad is probably the best I've ever seen when it comes to people skills, okay? And so I've really gotten to learn from the best. And his greatest people skill is simply a genuine interest in bringing out the best in others, in making others what I call feel genuinely good about themselves. And so really I think it means so much to me because I'm carrying on the legacy of my hero, my dad. And my mom and dad, again, I just can't speak enough about how, they just celebrated their, I think, 57th or 58th anniversary, and what a great example of just being human beings that they are. So very passionate about the message of this new book, and passionate about animals. I love them. I'm just amazed that people can actually abuse animals and abandon them, and it's a disgusting aspect of life when you think of it. So we need as many people as we can that will do what we can to protect them, because they can't take care of themselves, and they need the two-legged beings to care for them. And then my other passion is free enterprise and the free market system. And unfortunately, Matthew, so many people have a skewed view. They simply have a view of free enterprise and the free market that isn't what it really is. Really, when you think of it, free market capitalism is simply when people are able to buy, sell, and trade with one another peacefully and voluntarily. That's what it is. Government has a reasonable place in that legitimate function is to keep people from defrauding each other or forcing each other or harming each other. But other than that, it's pretty much to kind of keep out of the way and create the environment where people are free to live their lives however they see fit, both financially and personally, and as long as people don't infringe upon the rights of others. Anything else isn't free market, and it's not true liberty. So unfortunately, people confuse what's called cronyism. Some people mistakenly call it crony capitalism, and I've never liked that because it kind of lends a legitimacy to it as though it's a form of capitalism, and it's not. There's capitalism, which is free market. Well, cronyism is when companies buy special favors from government through, and that's not free market. And unfortunately, people think it is, and even the people who should know better and have a huge following, they sort of put that message across. So, my feeling is that this has been proven since free market capitalism has come into being, really no more than a few hundred years ago, because before that, the natural state of the world, or the usual state of the world, was dire poverty. There were always the few very, very wealthy, and the rest were poor. What capitalism did is it created a huge middle class, and to the degree that true capitalism is allowed to flourish, what happens is it raises the standard of living for everyone. If you're going to be poor, you want to be poor in a basically free country, as opposed to a third world country. You know what I'm saying? And so that's really, so as you can tell, I'm passionate about that message and trying to get it across to as many people as possible.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Very cool. All right, next question. What were some of your biggest fears that you had to overcome as you began your journey into your career path and kind of finding your own way?
You know, I think it's the fear that you can't really measure up. You know, the fear that, and some people don't have that fear, and God bless them. I mean, I'm glad. You know, they don't know enough to be scared.
Yeah.
But I think with most of us, it's natural that we have doubts. You know, we've gone through our mistakes. We've seen the things we've done. That how did we do that? You know, and I think there's always that thing where you say, you know, can I really measure? Do I have what it takes? I've been fortunate in that as many mistakes as I've made and as many failures as I've had my share of successes too, and you know. But I think there's always that fear. You know, do I really? What's next? And can I? So it's interesting because I do have a very genuine confidence in myself in certain areas.
Yeah. Yep.
And in those areas, that confidence is a very deep confidence. But that doesn't include everything. So there's plenty of areas where, believe me, I still have those fears.
Yeah. Cool. And if you got to share only one piece of advice to all of our listeners, what would it be and why?
One piece of advice on that.
Or two.
I'd have to say, don't think you have to know everything in order to do something. There's other people who already know it.
Yeah.
So tap into what they know. I call it the success formula. You know, once you know what it is you desire, okay, because all accomplishments begin with desire. Napoleon Hill said that in Think and Grow Rich. Once you know what you desire, then you need to seek out and find the system. In other words, someone has already done it. And they've written a book about it, or they're giving seminars on it, or they're on the internet about it, or there's something.
Yeah.
Seek out, find the information. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. You can save yourself lots of time and lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Next is apply the information immediately. In other words, I don't mean before you're ready, but I mean once you know what you need to do, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
You know, Zig Ziglar once said, anything worth doing is worth doing poorly until you know how to do it well.
Yep.
And the chances are, as he used to say also, if you wait until all the lights are green at every intersection, you're never going to get started.
You wait forever.
Right. And then third is outlast the no's. Be persistent. You know, it's interesting. A couple of friends of mine, a married couple, Andrea Waltz and Richard Fenton, have a book called Go For No. It's at GoForNo.com. And the premise, it's a business fable, a wonderful book. Premise of the book is that yes is the destination, no is how you get there.
Yep.
And they talk about not only putting up with the no's, but being able to actually show you how to embrace the no's in order to get to where you want to go. Here's the interesting thing. If you're going to get anywhere big, you're going to get a lot of no's. Yeah. A lot of rejection. You're going to get knocked in your rear end sometimes. It's just going to happen. And so we've got to be able to be persistent. And it's part of life. I think what happens with a lot of people is that they see the people who are where they want to be. And then they get, 10 people in a row telling them no. And they say, oh, I guess I just don't have, not going to happen. I don't have what it takes. The other people, what they don't realize is that other person has already gotten, 100 times the no's they've got.
Yep.
So, it's not the no's that bother. It's just thinking we're the only ones that get the no's. So as long as we know that, we're okay. And then the final part of that success formula, again, desire, then it's number one, seek out, find the information. Number two, apply the information immediately. Three, be persistent, outlast the no's. And then it's just belief. It's having the belief in yourself, okay? And that's where you got to battle the demons sometimes, because as we were just talking about, we don't have 100% belief in ourselves. At least I don't. Didn't and don't. Yeah. And that's, I have a big belief, not 100%. Yeah. And so that when the doubts creep in, we've got to have that belief that what we're doing is the right thing, that we have what it takes, and that we're adding such significant value to the world through doing it that we just got to do, because if we do it enough, it's going to happen. And that's when we get what we call 10 feet tall and bulletproof.
Yep. I love that. That's one of the things that when I first became an entrepreneur, like you said, you nailed it. I have a lot of confidence in myself, but there's certain areas where I still see a ton of growth that I need to do. And sometimes that fear of, here I am today, here's where I want to be tomorrow, and how the heck do I bridge that gap, can stop someone from taking, the simplest of action, which is what you have to do.
Sure.
But yeah, it's the belief in self, I think, is the thing that people have to internalize the most in order to overcome all those no's, to have that desire, to believe in that desire, and keep pushing through to make sure they reach their goals. Great advice.
Thank you.
All right, here's a good one. How do you define success now after all the experiences you've had, and how is that different from how you defined success in the beginning of your career or journey?
That's a great question, because success is a word that's used a lot without being defined.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, where there are some things that do have one definition, success in many ways has to do with context.
Yeah.
For example, success can be as simple as accomplishing a goal. If you want to lose 15 pounds in 3 months, let's say, to make it easier mathematically, 10 pounds in 3 months, okay? And after 3 months, you've lost 9 pounds. Well, you weren't successful in terms of the goal of 10 pounds. You were 90% successful. Okay, so you can define success as to the degree that you accomplished a goal. You play a baseball game, and the team loses 3-1. Well, the team who won was successful in the game. But the team who lost obviously wasn't successful in terms of the game, in terms of the score, but did they play better than they played last time? If that's the case, they were successful in that regard. So in other words, there is some, wiggle room in terms of the definitions. It is by way of context. Now, you have someone like Earl Nightingale, who's one of the deans of professional speaking and of the self-improvement. And he, he had a couple of famous records actually back then. One was Lead the Field, and one was the Strangest Secret. And I think it was in Lead the Field, which was the first one of his I heard 30 years ago, maybe. Yeah. He defines success as the progressive realization of a worthwhile dream or goal. Now, I've also heard it said that I've also heard him quoted as saying success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. But it was the first one that I remember. And think about that. When he's talking about success, he's not talking about the finish. It's just the progressive realization. It means you've started here, but you're progressing. You're getting so just by the nature of that, it's success. Now, he also, the other part of it, the end part, was of a worthy goal or ideal. So being the wealthiest drug dealer on the corner is not success, because it's not a worthy ideal. Okay, so we've got to take those two aspects in mind. But isn't it interesting how he didn't? And then you look at John Wooden, who was the winningest coach in sports history until he was overtaken, I think, by Coach K, maybe, or maybe Rick Pitino. I'm not sure, but I mean, for years and years, he was the winningest coach ever. I think in all of sports, never mind basketball. I think that there was something like 10 out of 11 years they were the NCAA champion, and I'm off on 1 or 2 years, but it's pretty much like that. Arguably the greatest coach of all time. And in his definition of success, it had nothing to do with winning games. He didn't focus on the win. He focused on the process to get there. And he was proud of his players and considered them successful when they came close to living up to their potential. So I sort of play on that a little bit when I say, what is success really? Ultimate success. It's a feeling, I would say it's a feeling of genuine happiness and peace of mind based on having done one's best in living up to their potential. Right, so to the degree you live up to your potential in a certain area, that's the degree to which you can say you're successful.
When I first started Entrepreneur, I compared myself to Zuckerberg and the Facebook guys and the Twitter guys, and I was like, oh, if I can't start a social network that has 300 million users and bought out by billionaires, like, I'm not successful, and what am I doing, and I'm wasting my time. But I just finished one of my other favorite books, The Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
Wonderful.
I love that book, and the phrase I keep repeating to myself, and it brought a sense of peace over the last week that I haven't had in recent years because of my go, go, go mentality and when am I going to achieve that level of success is what time is it now? Where are you here? And to me, that's like, okay, that's success then, is to be able to be in this moment at all times and to be happy with it, to be motivated, to be inspiring others, and let go of that 5-year goal or that 10-year dream of I need this, or once I achieve that, then I'm this. It's if you can be here, present, and enjoy all this, and again with a worthy goal, success has already found you, and it's just at what point does it unfold in certain ways along your path.
Yeah, well, and it doesn't mean you won't be the next Zuckerberg, although you'll be the next Rhoda. You'll do what you're supposed to do, and what happens when it's supposed to happen. And there's nothing that says you have to settle for anything unless you keep going.
Yeah.
But there's no time limit on it. Ray Kroc started McDonald's when he was 55 years old, or didn't start McDonald's when he bought the system of McDonald's so that he could sit and so forth when he was 55. We all know those stories. It doesn't have to. How old are you?
31. I'll be 32 in a couple months.
I mean, you're so far ahead at 31 than I was, just as far as knowing stuff. I mean, my goodness. I mean, you are on your way. But there's really, you say, well, what about the people like Zuckerberg, who by the time they were 23 or 24, or Gates, or those guys, and you think of how seldom that happens.
Yeah.
It's sort of, I remember in comedy, they used to talk about to be a comedian who really made it big, it typically wasn't before 30 or 35 years old.
Yeah.
But then somebody would say, well, what about Eddie Murphy? And you're too young probably to remember when he was on Saturday Night Live. I mean, that was, and he got hit big by the time. And just the fact that you can say, what about Eddie Murphy, shows the Eddie Murphys are very few and far between. Every so often it happens that there's a Zuckerberg, or there's a Gates, or there's, somebody or a Murphy, or somebody who's not usually. It typically is when, the 20s are when you're practicing. The 20s are when you're learning everything. It's when we think we know everything, and we're disappointed that we're not millionaires by the time we're 30, but it's when we're learning. The 30s start where you start hitting it, and then the 40s is, it kind of comes together. If we're lucky and if things happen. But I mean, if we do because you never know. What's
exactly.
going to be But really, there's one mistake I made was doing that same thing. It was putting time pressure on myself to have to be at a certain point by a certain time.
Yep.
Very rarely did I hit those goals because I was so concerned with the time. Yep. When you're young, you really think there's not enough time to do the things you want to do. Yep. You don't know that time is your friend. And it actually is. So that's one of those things. If I could go back, I would realize that there's much more time to accomplish things than what I think there is. If I'm looking at it as a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old.
That's great to hear, because you summed it up perfectly. If I don't make it by the time I'm 30, I read all these Inc. magazines and success, and I see these guys on the front, and I'm like, that can be me. That should be me. Why isn't that me? What am I doing wrong? But now I've let that go, and it's like this process is part of the fun. And like you said, if it happens when I'm 35 with a book, thank you, universe. If it happens at 42 on stage somewhere, thank you, universe. The outcome is kind of not irrelevant, because obviously I have certain visions that I'd like to achieve, but I'm not holding on to it and grasping for dear life like it's then.
Well, the key is not to be attached to it. It doesn't mean you don't have the goal. That's fine. We should have the goals, and we should have everything. We all, have learned that, and we know that's fine. It's not being attached to having to have a certain outcome. When you lose the attachment, that loosens up the ability to actually do the things that you desire.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Do you have any regrets? If so, would you like to share them? If you don't have any regrets, how could you be at such peace?
In many ways I am at peace. I still have a lot of regrets. And you hear people say, well, no, I have no regrets. If I had a do-over, I'd never do anything different.
Yeah.
Well, that's not me. I still think back to really things I did that were not productive, and things that not only hurt my own personal growth, but things that maybe hurt other people. Times I could have spoken nicer to somebody. Times I could have been more considerate. Times I made a stupid investment that I would, if I could change it all of them, I would. People say, well, would you want to go back to being, 20 again? Well, no, I love my life, and I love how it's turned out. I'm 56 years old. and life gets better for me every day emotionally. Now, physically, not so much, okay?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go back. But then if someone said, okay, well, what if you could go back to being 20, but you've got the knowledge and wisdom that you have as a 56-year-old? Yeah, I'd go back.
Yeah.
I'd go back because I'd be able to create some really good things. I mean, with foresight, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
You know,
Unstoppable.
People could say I don't have any regrets. Now, I don't regret my life. I love it. It's actually turned out very well. But do I have regrets? Sure. Anything I did that maybe hurt another person or hurt myself or whatever, absolutely, I regret it.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. What's one lesson you learned later in your journey that you wish you would have learned earlier, and what type of difference do you think it could have made for you?
Well, I think it goes back to my thinking when I was younger that I had to invent the wheel. That either I had to do it myself or it didn't count.
Yep.
I also thought I knew much more than I did. I think I would probably, if I could talk to my 20-year-old self, I'd say, just shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because not only do you not have to do it all by yourself, you're not smart enough to do it all by yourself.
You thought you could, you can't. Awesome. All right, and then we kind of already touched on this, but finish this sentence for us. I knew I was successful when...
I'd say when I began to feel good about myself as a human being,
Yep.
when I felt comfortable in my own skin.
Yep. Very good.
And there was definitely a certain point in time where that came together, and I'd say at that point I really felt successful in the broader sense.
Big picture. Cool. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received from somebody else, whether it be a book or a friend or...
Well, when I was a little kid, and I would always go to my dad with some problem that I had that day, and I was always very deep thinking, and I got, I was angry at a lot and felt, hurt by the world. I didn't see the world when I was a little kid. I just didn't see the world as a benevolent place, and I just didn't particularly like people and so forth. So I'd go to my dad and say, "Oh, this happened or that happened. I feel so bad about this." And yeah, 7, 8 years old, a little kid, and Dad would always say, or I'd say, "Why did this have to happen?" Or I'd be somewhere at the wrong place at the wrong time, or why does this happen? Dad would always say, "Son, we don't know the exact reason, but just know that God works in strange and mysterious ways, and God has a reason for everything."
Yep. Yeah.
Now, that gave me a sense of hope that this wasn't in vain. You know what I'm saying? That I may feel really lousy. And he didn't say don't feel bad. He didn't say, he didn't take away my right to feel bad.
Yep.
He knew I felt bad. But it was very wise of him to say that, there's a reason for it. You don't know the reason for it. We don't, but there's a reason for it. And what's interesting is it always seemed, again, even when I was a young kid, that it wasn't long before it worked itself out. And there was some reason for it that in retrospect I could see, but I didn't know at the time. And so whenever that happened, that doubly helped me know, well, I still feel lousy about what's just happened. I could be 15 years old or 16 or whatever, or 23. I still feel bad about this awful thing or this seemingly awful thing that just happened, but I know God has a reason for it. I don't know the reason, but I know there's a reason for it. And by the way, I'm not saying anybody has to believe that. We all have our own faiths. I'm of the Jewish faith and see things one way and someone else sees another way. That's fine. Yep. It's just the way that I was taught, and what has really worked for me in being able to deal with some of the angst and anguish and so forth. So, which again, doesn't mean that when something's bothering us that we have to say, oh, it's fine. No, it can really feel, I'll be technical here, yucky. Okay?
Yeah.
But if we don't, so that was the wisest piece of advice I ever received. That was from my dad, to know that there's a reason for, at least there's a reason for this that will work itself out. Now, can I share a piece of business advice I once got that also I feel rates with that, was a real life changer for me?
Please do.
I remember I was selling for a certain company, and I was sort of the young up-and-coming salesperson in that company. And one of the guys there, he was just about to retire. He wasn't a sales guy either. He was in the engineering department. He was about to retire, and I think we met once, and that was it. But he gave me such a one of my mentors, Don DiScumaci, we call these drive-by mentors. It's like a drive-by and they give you this great piece of advice and he said, Burg, if you want to make a lot of money in sales, don't have making money as your target. Have serving others or serving the customer, I think he said, as your target. He said, now, when you hit the target, you'll get a reward. The reward will be money, and you can do with that what you want. But the money is not the target. Serving your customer is the target. And then you look at law number 1 in the Go-Giver, the law of value, and that's all what it's about. Focus. So something like that, and that totally reframed myself. I mean, I knew sales was about providing value, but I got to admit, when I first started in sales, it was, this is how you make money by doing this. Doesn't mean you don't care about money. Money's very important. It's a commodity that we use as a means of exchange. But that's not where the focus should be. And this is why we say that money is simply an echo of value. It's the thunder to value's lightning, which means the value must come first. That must be the focus. The value comes first. The money is simply a direct and very natural result of the value you've provided. And that drive-by mentor is really the person with that one piece of advice that made such a difference.
That stuck on you. Very cool. All right, I'll wrap it up here. I'm taking a little bit more of your time than I expected, and I appreciate all this. Let me ask one more question here. Let me see which one's my favorite one to end on. Here's a good one. Do you meditate? Because I'm a big fan of meditation. Again, I sit down each morning for 15 or 20 minutes and do my seated position, and I have a couple mantras that I repeat. And then good old Way of the Peaceful Warrior, he's like, if you sit down and meditate, you're in kindergarten. And I'm like, I still have so much to learn. But to me, it's still important for me to set some time aside each day and to give myself that focus and kind of calm down. And the world can be full of chaos, but no matter what, I'm here, I'm now, and I'm here. So do you find purpose and kind of value in meditation? Do you exercise? You already mentioned that you read a ton of books, which I think is great. And then do you think diet and eating healthy contributes to like a good, active, forward-moving lifestyle?
I wish I could tell you that I meditate, but I don't. I just find my mind is just all over the place, and had I taken enough time to really work on it, I probably could have got it, never did, and it just wasn't something I invested the time in doing. So, no, I don't meditate. I think a lot. I'm always thinking, but that's probably the opposite. It's right, being able to lose that attachment to thinking. So, no, I don't meditate. I do read a lot, as you said.
And then the exercise and eating.
Exercise and diet. Here's the interesting thing. I work out steadily 6 days a week, but not because of any type of self-discipline. It's because I hired a personal trainer because I don't have the discipline anymore. When I was a kid, when I was younger, I did. I have lost that self-discipline to work out. I don't value it. I don't want to do it. So what I do is I pay really good money to a woman. Her name is Diane. She's my personal trainer. She comes over 6 days a week to the house. 3 days we do resistance training. 3 days we do, interval training. And she keeps me doing it. And if it wasn't for Diane, I wouldn't be doing it. But I do it. And I just know you have to sometimes create the environment for success. So my way of creating that environment for success is to hire Diane and be accountable both to her being there and to her wisdom. She also prepares my meals for me, so it keeps me, on the right track. Do I ever, cheat with some junk food? Yeah, I do.
Of course.
But I'm still much further ahead than if I wasn't doing the scheduled activity and scheduled eating.
Very cool. Well, Bob, it's been a pleasure, sincere honor, like I said to you in the beginning, and I've been saying on the internet, I'm floored by your generosity and the fact that you take time to talk with somebody who's not on the radar or doing anything, with books and the special stuff. So
you're doing great. You're on your way. You're a rising star, my friend. You just keep doing what you're doing.
We appreciate everything you've done and the continued wisdom you share, and our audience will thank you. I'm sure once I've uploaded this and send it to everybody, everyone will benefit from it. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure and an honor, and I'm very grateful for it.
My pleasure, Matthew. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Talk to you soon.